Hi, my name is Blair, and in this tutorial I'll show you how you can complete your first transaction using uCommerce and the Braintree Payment Gateway. The agenda for this tutorial then is we'll do a demo of your first transaction with uCommerce. We'll take a look at the Umbraco and uCommerce architecture that made this transaction possible. So we'll take a look at the Braintree Payment Gateway, we'll take a look at the uCommerce back office configuration, in particular the Braintree payment method setup. We'll then take a look at some selected code snippets of interest, particularly the config files that were changed and the uCommerce pipelines of interest, including how to debug them, and finally the Braintree payment form. Okay, let's demo our first transaction then. Quick overview of our setup. What we have is an IIS localhost website, localate.ecommerce, and we've installed Umbraco 863. Yeah, and then we included NuGet package for uCommerce, and then we added the Avenue Clothing demo store, and being in the UK, wanted to change that configuration to use the GBP currency and a VAT rate of 20. So what we find is that a demo store, the default catalog, will use the default price group of GBP 20. And if we look at the catalog price group, we can see that that is GBP and 20. I find when I initially changed that, I had to index everything from scratch, otherwise all the prices of the Avenue Clothing store products, they all just disappeared. So bear that in mind if you change the default currency, which was euros. In addition, I wanted to use Braintree Payments for the transaction, so we added that as a payment method and then configured it. So what you'll see is if you use Braintree Payments, then initially you use it in test mode, which means it will go to the Braintree sandbox account, and when you configure this payment method, you need to use the sandbox account details, so the merchant ID, the public key and the private key. You put yours in there. The callback URL and the payment form URL, they're auto, as uCommerce has got two handlers, one for making the payment request and one for the callback with the result of the request, whether it's been authorized or declined. Also, when making a payment, you have to supply your own form to take the credit card details, and they'll be posted to the Braintree server. You then give it an accept URL where it will post the result of a successful authorization together with a good that represents the order ID that is then stored with the order in the database. There's also a decline URL, which doesn't seem to get used at the moment. If a payment request is declined, then the payment form template is represented to allow the user to specify another credit card. So that's the main configuration there. So we go to the look on Braintree. This is a sandbox account, and I've just created a sandbox user, and what I found was that this created a default merchant account ID, in my case global trade, but its currency was euro. I didn't want that, so I had to create another account, global trade GBP sandbox, to specify the currency GBP and make that as the default one, so all requests will come in and target the GBP currency. And this is where you would configure in the production site your actual bank account that will take receipt of the payments. If you go to the APIs, this is where you'll see your public key and your private key that you paste into uCommerce and Umbraco together with the merchant ID. So that's how the two items tie up. Alright, let's take a look at the store then. So when you install the store, this is what you get out of the box. You can see that cart's empty, so we'll place an order for a shirt, so 262.80. You'll see 20% VAT is kicking in there, and we're going to proceed to the checkout, and we'll just put some street details in there. And so we're United Kingdom, and we'll give it our phone number. Right, and we'll take free shipping, and our new configured Braintree Payments, and we'll keep the charges simple for now. So here we go, we've got our one expensive shirt, and we'll complete that order. At this point, it will prompt you to enter the credit card details. In other implementation, Braintree accepts PayPal, but that's missing by default in the default payment form that comes with uCommerce, but that's something that we might want to add. As the Braintree's account, you can link to a PayPal account that will then make PayPal payments go straight into your business PayPal account, which is very useful. That was the setup in Marcello, if any of you have used that. So we complete the order now, and yeah, it's quite a poor default form that comes out of the box, but for demo purposes I wanted to just use a minimalist change approach just to get it working. So and you'll see here that there's no auto-filling of the credit card details because we're in HTTP mode at the moment. If we change the Chrome flags to be secure for this local site, you could probably enter them, but we're using fake card numbers for these purchases anyway, so it doesn't really matter. fill your bits on this credit card if you want. So go to the credit card details, and you can see here this is one of the handlers, the payment request handler. There's a payment process handler for coming back. So as soon as we post it, that then goes over to the Braintree Gateway processing the sandbox account. And incidentally, if you look at the form, you'll find that uCommerce puts in the sandbox account because we're in test mode, and it fills in the public key and probably encodes the private key as well. And this is basically your payment form, and when it submits, it goes to the Braintree Gateway. So that's that. You have to apply your own styling or create your own content page and save it to disk. I had a look in the code, and it looks for a physical file for the payment form. So if you want it with your site's surrounding master page, then it's going to take some work. But this is what you get out of the box. So we've supplied our details, and what we notice is that on the sandbox account, anything less than £2,000 will be approved automatically. So we'll post that. See, it's busy, and we'll get a thank you for your order. So what we can see is there's an order good that comes with the order. I can see my email account. We can see that I did get an email back for the shop 26280. Incidentally, there's no order ID in order confirmation, so that's another area that will need some development. Now, if we go on to Braintree sandbox account, we should be able to find that transaction. We search for this month, and there we see that today we have 262, so we found it, and there's the ID for the transaction. One thing at the moment that we'll need to research is you've got to manually submit for settlement on other e-commerce sites that use Braintree. It can be automatically submitted for settlement. The difference between being authorised and being settled is authorised is just the bank account will mark that amount as a pending payment, not an actual payment. It's only once you submit for settlement and the payment becomes settled that the amount is actually taken. So be careful about shipping goods before you actually see that the transaction has been settled. So that's the Braintree transactions, and what we find is that now if we go to SQL Server, what we can see is that there should be an order. An order number that matches this good. Alright, and then we see order 178 matches that, 26280 again, and we should see that in the back store. Oh, yeah. So if we look at the new orders, there we can see 26280. That's the new order for our shirt, and that appears okay. Again, in this default form, test date is the order, but it doesn't give the order ID 178. And if you notice here, the transaction ID can be taken from the Braintree Sandbox account, but we can see here that 178 should match that transaction ID on Braintree D5. So let's just go there and see if we can find it. So and there we go. D5 is the order ID that we got. So the order and the payment match up, and we've got our credit card details there and the amount. So that's the order tied up, and we've got our email completing the order. So I think that is kind of it for the setup. As I said, the only other thing that that I did with this account was I linked PayPal. There's a PayPal Sandbox account, and you put in your key details here, and it links the two payments, so that to pay by PayPal, then the funds will be deposited in your PayPal business account, or in your credit card bank account is configured directly in here. An overview of the architecture then. On the local PC we develop in Visual Studio. We create a website and then installed Umbraco and uCommerce. We then mapped that website onto a local IIS website, locally at e-commerce here. We then installed the Avenue Clothing Umbraco package, download it from the URL on screen. When we install Umbraco, we install into SQL Server, and we've got e-commerce here. So once we've got our website, the user will come along, use the website, purchase products on the website, and then proceed to checkout. In checkout, we'll present our payment method, Braintree, and the configured payment form will be presented via the payment request handler. So we enter our credit card details. They'll get posted to the Braintree Sandbox URL, passing our merchant ID, public key, private key details, and on there we've configured a merchant account with the GBP currency that will get used to process the payment. If the payment's declined, we'll go back to the checkout step 1. The user's asked to enter a different credit card. If the payment is authorized, then a transaction is created, and that transaction ID is passed back to the local website through the payment processor handler, whereby it will complete complete the purchase by running the checkout pipeline. So we create an order associated with the transaction, send the confirmation email, we empty the basket, and we redirect to the accept URL, which is generally the confirmation page, completing the order cycle. Okay, taking a look at some selected code snippets. First one of interest is the custom config. What I added here was a couple of debug parameters to the basket and checkout pipelines. This causes extra log messages to be put into the Umbraco config, so you can see which tasks are actually running in these pipelines. So that was useful. Checkout pipeline is the one after our payment has been approved, and you can see all the tasks that are run here, finishing off with sending a confirmation email. So you can add your own components in here. You just need to register them with the names and any of your custom DLLs. Make sure they're either in one of the app subfolders or in the general bin directory. The Braintree config tells you which DLL the handler's in, and you can go and use Reflector on that. Similarly for the basket processing, calculating prices and taxes and things, it's the pipeline that contains all that, so you can add your own details. There's also the basic Braintree form, and what you'll find is there's some items that are mapped here as substitution strings that Braintree processor will take a look at. So if you go to something like Reflector, you can load up the Braintree DLL and see things like action URL is actually the Braintree payment processor, so you can see that sandbox URL will be used, or the production URL, based on whether the test mode flag is set earlier on there, as you can see. And all the other values in that form, TR data, etc., are filled in or substituted. So ILSpy, very useful for seeing what's actually going on inside uCommerce and payment providers. And finally, in the web config, we can see that the URLs are rewritten so that catalogs and products are rewritten to target these pages, the catalog / product or / catalog pages that are directly configured in Umbraco, and also the payment request and payment process handlers are identified there, and the types, let you go and inspect those in a Reflector. And that completes the short summary of code snippets. To summarise then, there's certainly some effort required to get transactions working, especially in desired currency, in my case GBP, as the default was Euro. The basic credit card form was a bit disappointing, so there's a lot of effort required there, both to style it and to embed it into your site. I think I'd have preferred if it was hosted on Braintree site. Efforts required to theme the front end, although you might get use of some of the partial views and macros that come with Avenue closing. Pipelines were quite an interesting approach, both for the basket processing and checkout. So it should be relatively easy to add your own functionality and anywhere that a pipeline exists. Had a look in Reflector. The free license is very, very restrictive. Only one catalogue, one price group, no marketing, in one language, which for a basic store would be okay. But then for a basic store like that, I'd probably be tempted to look at WordPress and uCommerce as an offering rather than this. And also Reflector shows that the license is checked aggressively on loads of URL calls, and it looks like the license, there's a license file and a license key file, but one of those files seems to have the machine name as part of the file name, and I've been using Azure and I know that it can swap your app to a different machine name at random, so that could potentially cause problems.